Welcome to my React Navigation version 5 tutorial. In this video, we're going to be building out the navigation for a app. And we're going to be going over the style that is most popular these days. And that is to have tabs at the bottom and then being able to click around to different pages when you're on a single tab. Now for this video, I'm going to assume you know how to set up React Native and get an emulator running. If you don't, then I would recommend starting here on the React Native Getting Started page. So I already have my project set up here and I have an emulator up and running. I'm going to be using the iOS emulator, but feel free to use your phone or the Android emulator. And the way I got started with this project is just expo init and then the name of my project. So for this, I am using expo, but feel free to use the React Native CLI if you prefer. Nothing we do in this video is going to be specific to expo. I just like using it because it's a little bit simpler to set up. And I'm using the TypeScript template, but feel free to use the regular blank one up here if you prefer JavaScript. I'm going to point out the TypeScript specific things so you can follow along with JavaScript as well. So I already ran that and started up the emulator just with npm start, and that's what I have on the right here. Now the first thing that we're going to do is install some dependencies for the project. So we need to actually install React Navigation. Now if you go to the docs for React Navigation and go to the getting started, there's several packages we have to install, so the easiest thing to do is just copy and paste it from the docs. So this is the first one. You can just copy it here at React Navigation Native, and we can paste that in here. I've already run this, so I'm just going to Control-C out, but you're going to run that command. And then after that, if you're using Expo, you're going to install these libraries right here. So we can copy that, paste it in here, and they're using Expo install if you're using Expo because this installs that specific version. You could also just do npm install. I think that'll work just fine. I don't think the specific versions matter, at least in development, but Expo install if you want to be safe. And then otherwise, if you're using the React Native CLI, you can come down here and follow the instructions for that. And then after that, we're just going to the guides tab here and then going to upgrading from v4. On this page, they have all the other packages that you can install. So we have to now individually install the different stacks and types of navigation we're going to be using. So under package names, you can see we're going to be using a few of these. So we're going to be using React Navigation Stack, and we already installed the native one, so we don't have to worry about that. So npm I, I'm going to paste this one in. And then we're also going to be using bottom tabs. And then I'm also going to show you how to do stuff with a drawer, so we can copy that. And then we're also going to be using the Faker library just to show some dummy data, so I'm going to include that as well. So I'm going to Control-C out of this, but you're going to want to run this to install that. And then lastly, we're just going to npm I-D and install the types for Faker. You only need to do this if you're using TypeScript. After you finish installing all that, we're ready to get started. So we're going to just go into the app.tsx or maybe JS for you. And we are going to start from here. So this is going to be the starting file, and that's what's going to be shown in the emulator over here. And we can change the text to say hello and save it as we work. And it's going to change over here on the right. And I usually like to create a source folder over here to put all my files in. And I'm going to create a new file called routes.tsx. Now, every time I do .tsx, if you're using JavaScript, you can do .jsx. But I'm going to type it like this. And we're going to be creating lots of components in this video. So I have a snippet that I like to do for creating components that just inputs all of this very nicely. So if you want to follow along and do the same thing, if you go up to code and then preferences, user snippets, and then you go to the programming language you're using. In this case, I'm using TypeScript React. But you may just be using JavaScript React. This is the snippet that I'm using. So if you want to copy it, you can, and let's bring it all the way here. So this is the snippet that I'm using. Basically how it works is whenever I type RH, it's going to put this text in there for me. And you'll notice I'm also using some variables. And what these variables will do is give the name of the file in there. So it's very convenient. All right, so I'll let you pause the video if you want that, and we'll continue on. So here I'm going to create my first route. So we are going to say const stack is going to be create stack navigation, And I'm going to just import that function first so we can get some auto completion. So I'm going to say stack, and it's going to be React Navigation Stack. Now this is another thing I'm going to be doing throughout this video, is just doing autocomplete. So whenever you have your cursor in like this, if you do control space, it should bring up autocompletion like this. So I'm going to import from @React Navigation Stack, and then I'm going to say create stack navigator. And then we're going to say stack.navigator, and then we're going to say stack.screen. And then this is where we're going to put our screens. Now the other thing that I forgot to do, which we're going to do real quick, is wrap our entire stack navigator in a provider. So we're going to import from the native module. So React Navigation Native, and it's going to be called the navigation container. And we just need to wrap it with this. So the new React Navigation 5 API is all with components like this. And so for these components to know the state and stuff, we need to wrap them all inside of this navigation container. And then here we can say our screen name. I'm just going to create the first one here called login. And then we need to pass in a component. So I can create a function up here called login. And I'm going to return a view and some text. And we're just going to import these from React Navigation, or sorry, not React Navigation, React Native. And I brought up that little window just by pressing my cursor over view and then hitting Command period or Control period, and that'll bring up the import menu. And then I'm going to import this, so control space on text and import like that. That's the other way you can import it. And so yeah, we have view and text imported from React Native now. We have this here. We're going to pass in our login component. And then we now want to render our routes. So all I'm going to do is get rid of our app.tsx stuff over here. This is just some dummy text they'll give us. And render our routes. So now in our app.tsx, we're just going to have our routes, and then we're importing from the routes file. So source routes.tsx is the path. And then back over here, you'll notice we now have the title of the screen, right? So login maps to login up there, and it says I am the login screen right there. Now, a very common thing that I'm going to do in this video is center stuff, just so it's easier to see. And the way, or at least one way you can center stuff in React Native, is to make the view flex the entire screen, which is just by saying flex 1. And then we can say align items center and justify content center. And so that'll do both horizontally and vertically and put it all the way in the middle for us. And so I'm actually just going to create a new component here called center.tsx. And I'm going to paste it in here. That just so I can reuse this component. Now, one thing I don't think I mentioned yet is I'm using TypeScript. So this stuff you can avoid if you're using JavaScript. So the interfaces and the react.fc in this colon here, you can avoid if you're using JavaScript. This is specifically for doing the types of props. And for center, we're not going to have any props, so I just have an empty object there. But we are going to have children, and we're just going to pass that in. So children is always a prop we can take in React. And we're going to import that from view. So now what I can do over here, just call this center. And import that from the center component I just made there. And then it looks exactly the same, but now I can just use the center component whenever I want stuff to show up in the middle. So now we're going to add another screen. We have login, and we're going to add a register screen. So I'm going to call this name register, and I'm going to create a new component here called register. And we're going to say register here, and we're going to give that a save. Now you'll notice nothing really changed here, and that's because by default our screen is starting on the login screen. So our navigator here controls some different options. So I can say initial route name, and here I can say either login or register depending on what page I want to be the initial page. So for example here I could say register, and then we're going to have to totally restart this, our emulator over here. So if you click into here and you hit Command R, that's going to refresh it, or at least it usually does. There we go, now it's working. So sometimes it's a little bit slow, but another good thing to note is if you're on Android, you're going to press RR instead of Command R. And then if you're on a physical phone, you're actually going to shake the phone, and then it's going to bring up a little menu like this, and then you can press reload. And also, if you want to bring up this menu in the emulator, just Command D or Control D probably on Windows to bring this up. But as you can see, we now have our register screen showing up here because that is the initial route we showed. And if I change this to login, it's going to go back after I refresh. Now, quick note, I don't know if I mentioned this, but React Native is hot reloading now, and that's why the screen doesn't change immediately when I make this change. So if I hit Command R again and refresh this, we're going to see the login screen there. Now, really the next thing is to be able to navigate between these two screens without like changing this initial prop, right? So if we go to our login up here, they're going to be passed in a prop called navigation. And that's because it is a screen, right? And we passed where it's a component here. So the stack screen is actually going to pass it a navigation prop. And then what we can do here is we can add a button. And we can say title, go to register. And then we're going to say on press. And we're going to say navigation.navigate. And then a string. And this is going to be the route that we want to change to. And that's going to be the same name that we specify here. So I'm going to copy register and paste it in here. And then we can click on this button, and it's actually going to take us to the next screen. Now, something good to note now, a new thing you're going to see up here is this back button that we can press, and that'll actually take us back to the login screen. And so we're currently using a stack navigator. The reason why it's called stack navigator is it creates a stack. So whenever we go from the login screen to the register screen, login was now the last screen we were on, and it's going to keep track of that. And we have basically created a stack of the screens that we were previously on. And so we can hit the back arrow up there, and that'll take us back. The other way is we can also, from the register screen, add our own buttons. So we have access to navigation prop as well. So I could say button here, and I could say title, go to, and then the login screen. And so I could say on press, and then navigation.navigate to login. All right, so I can press this, go to register, and now instead of pressing the back button here, I can go to the login like that. Now you can see it basically did the same thing as clicking this, and that's basically just another way you can do it if you want to call it in your program. The other thing there's other kind of functions on here if we want to be explicit about the way we want to navigate. For example, instead of saying just navigate to a specific screen, I could have said navigation dot go back, and this will just take me back to the last screen that I was on. So if I comment that out and I go to register, I can now press this, and it still takes me back to login because that was my last screen. But if we had other screens, it just take us back to the last one we were on. But for now, I'm just going to keep this one. Maybe I'll just keep this commented out. Next, I want to show you how you can pass options to these different routes. So if I scroll down here on our stack.screen, we can actually pass in different options here. And if I create an object like this, and then I press Control Space, in TypeScript, it's actually going to show us all of the props we have available to us that we can actually pass in here. Now, if you're in JavaScript, I'm not sure if the IntelliSense will work. You may have to refer to the docs to get this information. But for example, one thing we could just try out here is we could try setting the header to null. So this is something that I do sometimes. And so this is for when you do not want this header up here to show up on your screen. So I did this on the register route. So if I say go to register here, you'll notice it is no longer there. So you can pass in options that will affect that particular screen. Could also do the same thing on the login screen if I wanted to. But what happens if I want this to be on all of the screens in my particular route? That's when I can come up here, and we can see we have a couple different props we can pass into this component. And I just did Control Space to see what they were. The one particularly that I'm talking about here is the screen options. So you notice we have a lot of the same options available to us here. I could say header null. or really it's a function that returns what the component is. It's also good to note we can pass in custom components here. This is what you pass in if you don't want anything to be rendered at all. And now I can get rid of the option here, and screen options will be applied to all of the components here. So you notice there's now no longer a header on either one of the screens, right? But I'm going to just comment that out. I do want a header. Another common one that you may use though is if you want to change the name. So for example, I have register there. Maybe I want this to say sign up. So I can say header title, sign up. And let's say I want this one to be sign in. All right, give that a save. So now we can see sign up and sign in here. So go back to login, you can see it there. So the name here is really just the key for actually navigating to it with the navigate function. But we can also give a different label if we want a different label up there. Because by default it's going to use the key, but we can pass a different one in if we want to. Now this next part you can ignore if using JavaScript. I want to show you guys that are using TypeScript how you can hook this up and get some better auto completion. Like for example in the navigation here we just have it of type any. And so the way we fix this is a little bit odd at first, but it is going to be pretty powerful and it's going to cover a lot of IntelliSense that's going to be nice. So what we're going to do here is actually just create a new file, which I'm going to call authparamlist.ts. And basically I'm going to create a new type called authparamlist. And I'm basically calling this stack the auth stack because I have register and login, and so that's why I did auth here. And then the param list just means here I'm going to list the screens and the parameters that they have. So if I go back to my routes, I have two routes, login and register. So I'm going to copy them here, and you're going to want the same capitalization. And then I'm going to specify the parameters each route takes. So right now they don't take any parameters, so I'm going to pass in undefined. But we're going to see later how you can actually define any parameters that you want here. You can actually pass in an object if it does take it. So now I'm going to say register here, and that is going to be the auth param list. So it has login and register in it. So now if I come back to my routes over here, and when we said create stack navigator, I can actually pass this type in, auth param list. And so what's going to happen is the name down here is now type safe. So for example, if I accidentally mistype it, it's going to tell me, hey, that name doesn't exist in the param list. It should either be login or register, right? And so it's going to make sure that we're using the right keys for our screens. And then the next thing is to make sure we're navigating to the right screens, right? So navigation is still any here, but what we can do is do a colon here, and we can say navigation is equal to the navigation. Well, it's actually called the stack navigation prop. And let me just drop this down. And I think it auto completed for me. Yep. So this comes from the @React navigation stack. So we're importing it from there. And this takes two type params. So we're going to pass in the parameter list, which we already created. That's just auth param list. Auth param list. And the second is the string, which is the route that it's currently on. So in this case, we're on register. So we're going to put register here. And then navigation here now is going to be typed. So if I do navigation dot, I can see all the functions on it, which is sweet. And then if I say navigate, and I have a string here, I can see all the screens that I can navigate to. If this doesn't come up, if you just have your cursor in between the string here and push Control Space, it should pop up. And so it's also going to be type safe again. If we mistype this, register without an R, right, it's going to tell us, hey, this screen does not exist. There's not an expected screen. So that's how you can set up the TypeScript for it. Now, the other good thing to note here is navigation is not the only prop we have access to. We also have a prop called route. And we can say route prop to get that. And you can see here, it looks like it's going to be importing from @React navigation native. And then here we pass in the auth param list, I believe. Actually, I'm not even sure what we pass in. Let's just hover over and see. Yep, it's the param list. And then we're going to pass in the route name as well, so register. And then what route has or gives us access to is the params. In this case, it's undefined, so we're not going to see it here, but we're going to see it later. But it also tells us the name of the route. So I could just say route name, and then I could say route.name to see what the name is for the register screen. And we can see the route name is register for this. Now, something that I did just for a quality of life thing, it got kind of annoying to pass this big object in to every single screen that I wanted this for. So what I would do is I would take this, copy it, and create a little helper type here. And I just called this type auth nav props, and it's going to take a generic. And the reason why it's going to take a generic here is we don't know what the page is going to be, so we're just going to pass that in here. That's going to be our T. And then we can import these both. And then you're going to see this is going to complain because it expects T to be a key of this. So it expects T to either be login or register. So the way we can do this is we can say T extends one of the keys of this list. And what that means is if we extend a key, that means it's either login or it's register. So now coming back to my routes, instead of doing this, all I have to do is auth nav props and then pass in register. And then if I come up here, copy this, I can pass that to my login as well. So this is something I found was just a little bit simpler to set up the types, but you could also just pass this in directly if you prefer. And so I would actually create this for each stack that I created. So we just have a single stack right now, and we have all of our types lined up. So now the next thing really is to add another stack. So the idea is after we log in, we want to be taken to a screen that has bottom tabs. So that's what we're going to set up. So I'm going to start by setting up a authentication provider. This way we can access the current user and know whether we are logged in or not. So I'm going to create a new file here called authprovider.ts, or I guess .tsx, I mean, because we are going to put some JSX in here. And I'm going to create my auth provider component here. And it's going to be auth context is equal to react.createContext. And we're going to export this context because we're going to use it in several different places. And what our auth provider is just the auth context.provider. And then we're going to pass in the children, of course. And that should be children lowercase that we get from our component. And save that. And we don't need to import children up here. So now the create context, the default, I'm just going to pass in a empty object here. And we're going to pass in a value. So by default, I guess just an empty object here as well. And so the idea with the auth provider is I want to be able to access the current user anywhere in the application. So I'm going to just store the current user using useState. Now with the auth provider, you could set this up with using Redux or MobX or maybe Apollo, whatever you want here. But I'm going to be using React Context to just keep it simple for this particular example. So here I'm going to have my user and then set user. So by default, the user is going to be null. And this is running a little bit off the page, but you get the gist of what it is, I think. There we go, we can bring it down. And so what I'm going to do past the provider here is the current user, and then I'm going to give it a few functions. The first is going to be login, and the second is going to be logout. And so what I'm going to do here is just save what happens to async storage. So here I'm going to log in, and I'm going to set the user, and I'm going to set him to have a username of Bob. So here I am just hard coding this, but again, this would be an API call usually. And then, well, I guess I'm going to make this fake user is equal to, because I want to persist this just to show you what an async version of this would look like. So I'm going to say set item user, and here the value needs to be a string, so I'm just going to say json.stringify our fake user here. And then all I'm going to do here is in the logout version, I don't want to clear all of them. I just want to set the user to be an empty string. Now, I just want to see, is there not clear a single key, or is this how you clear a single key? Let's see, get all keys. Nope, there's remove item. Let's do that. Dot remove item. And we'll remove our user. Okay, so now what we're going to be able to do is have access to these functions throughout our application, and then also know whether the user is logged in after, say, an app refresh, or they open and close based on the async storage that we have set up here. So now we just need to add the auth provider around our whole application. Now, since I am using TypeScript, I'm also going to make sure the types are lined up. So for example, I'm going to pass in here to the use state that the user can either be null or it can be an object with a username, which is a string. And then for the create context here, I'm going to pass in the type. So this can either be a user. So I'm going to create the type user, and I said it could be null or this object. And so what I'm going to say is we have a user, we have login, which is a function which returns void, and we have logout. Now it doesn't like it because right here we are not having the default values for these, so all I'm going to do is add those. So user is null, login is an empty function, and same with logout. And this should just be a comma. And this should just be user. The other thing that's good to note is right now this returns a promise, and I'm kind of just ignoring this. Ideally, you probably want to handle this in just a better method, at least the async stuff here, and catch it if it throws an error. But just for simplicity, I'm going to ignore it for now. And what I'm going to do is I want to wrap this provider in the whole application. So I'm just going to create a new file here, which I'm going to call providers.tsx, and I'm going to say providers with an S. And so this is where I'm going to add the auth provider, and I'm going to actually render routes inside of here. And so routes is my entire application right now, so I'm wrapping the entire thing in the auth provider. And so the only switch I need to make is instead of the routes that we're exporting here, I want to export providers. So this is in our app.tsx here. So now it should be wrapping our entire application in this provider. And again, in your application, if you have other providers, you could wrap them here as well. And I can click into my routes. And by the way, I don't think I've showed that yet. So I was in providers. If you hit Control or Command and then click on a particular component, it'll actually take you to it. So that's how I just navigated to routes right there. So what's going to happen now is, ideally when the page is first loaded, we don't know whether the user is logged in or not. And so we usually need to do some kind of request to our server or some kind of asynchronous check to see whether the user's logged in. So what I usually do here is I have a loading state. So I'm going to say loading and set loading. And by default, it's going to be true. So all I'm going to say here is if we are loading, I'm going to say return center and return an activity indicator. And we'll make it large. So when our app first loads, we're going to just show a spinner like this. And again, you could style this loading screen to look prettier if you like. And then what we can do is add a use effect here. And this is where we can check if the user is logged in or not. All right, so this is where we can have an async function that does any kind of logic we want. So in this case, we could say async storage dot get item, the user here, and I could say dot then, and we could get the user string, and then here I'm going to say catch any error and just console log the error. So I'm just going to open up the log here just to see, and it looks like it is null, which is what it's expected. We haven't set a user yet. So the idea is when a user is not logged in like this, we don't really need to do anything, right? We've checked, they're not logged in, and we can just say set loading is false, and we know the user is not logged in. And so this is going to, or we can get the user here by saying use context and using our auth context. All right, so we just imported auth context from our auth provider. That's what we just created. And this is an object that gives us access to the user, also access to login and logout. And so what I can do is I can actually render different stacks or different navigation based on whether the user is logged in or not. So what I can do here is I can say if the user exists, I want to say text you exist. Otherwise, I'm going to show them the login screen. All right, and I'm going to center the text so we are able to see it. And then the idea here, I'm actually surprised that set loading, I'm assuming set loading should have been set to false here. And then if loading should show that this stuff. So let me just refresh this to see if it's broken. And I'm just going to say console.log catch. And then we should be saying set loading is false here. And then this should no longer be showing. So do a little bit of debugging here. All right, so loading is set to true, and then it's just never set to false. So what looks like is happening is the .catch is never called. It looks like async source just doesn't throw an error. I think it just returns null. So I'm going to remove the console logs. I don't really need them anymore. And all I'm going to do here is do a check. I can say if the user string, decode it. Else we can say set loading is false. So I'm going to give that a run. And cool, so now it is showing me the login screen right here. And so the idea is, if I come back up to login, I can add another button now that says log me in. And we can access that function with our context. And again, usually they're going to fill out the form and then type login. But here I'm just going to literally call our login function. And it's always going to work. And so if I press this, you'll notice what happens is it passed in a user, right? And then if we come down to what our logic is down here, once the user is no longer null, we actually render this you exist. And so the idea is, if we refresh the page, it's going to show us that you exist now because the user is in there. So what I can do here is I can log the user in if it exists here. Ideally, again, you would decode this, but we don't even need to because we're just faking it right now. All right, so let's give this, and we just say set loading is false in either condition. So I'm just going to bring it down here. All right, so the you exist is showing here, and the idea is instead of just having a text, we're now going to do a totally different navigation. In this case, tabs on the bottom. And then to just round out how this all works, we're going to do log out in a second, but I want to show the bottom tab navigation first. Okay, so we're going to create a new file to put the tabs in. So I'm going to create a new file here called apptabs.tsx. And we're going to create a new component. And I'm going to say tabs is equal to create tab navigator. But I'm going to import it up here first because I'm not getting auto completion. So I'm going to say tabs. And it's going to be the bottom tabs is what we're going to use. And then inside of here, we're going to say create bottom tab navigator. All right, so create bottom tab navigator. And then we're going to say tabs.navigator. And then we're going to say tabs.screen. So you can see this is very similar to the stack navigator. And then here we're going to pass in our names. Now, similar to approach as our stack, we can actually pass in a param list here. So I can say app paramlist.ts. And I can say export type app paramlist. And again, this is just for TypeScript. And here I can specify the basically tabs I expect. We're going to start with just 2 tabs. I'm going to call the first tab home, and it's not going to have any parameters. And the second one I'm going to call search. And similar to what approach we're using with the stack, we can add a little type helper, but we're not going to do that quite now. We're going to do it in a second. So here can pass in the param list, so app param list. And now when I do the name here, I'm going to get some auto completion. So home, and I can create a home component. And not auto-completed for me, but this is with imports for center and text. And then we can pass in our component here. And I'm going to do the same for our other function, search. Okay, so if I come back to routes here, what's going to happen is instead of showing the you exist here, I'm going to render the app tabs. And we'll give that a save. So now you'll see here I have home and I have search. And we have some basic tabs at the bottom that we can switch back and forth on. Now I want to add log out real quick and then just show you the entire process so you get what's happening with this auth flow that we set up. So I have app tabs here, and just for simplicity, I'm going to stick log out in our home right now. So here I'm going to say use context. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but use context is being imported from React. And then we just pass in our auth context. And then we're going to grab that log out function, and we're just going to call it here. So button title is going to be log out, and on press we're just going to call log out. Okay, so now if I press this, nothing's happening. I was hoping something would happen. So let's check our code first. I think in my auth provider, yeah, I just forgot to say set user here and set it to null. So give that a save. Now set it to null. It should take us back to sign in. So perfect. That's exactly what should happen. Okay, so let's just go through the entire flow real quick to make sure you understand what's going on. So I'm just going to refresh this and start from sign in. So the first time a user comes to our app, they're going to be taken to this sign in screen. And you know what? Ideally, they're not actually really going to have a header. Usually in the sign in and the sign up screens, you're not. So usually you're going to show, an input, text input screen here, and you can usually swap from register to login and can swap back and forth like that, right? And then you're going to usually put in your information and you're going to press log me in. And so how that works for us, if we come back up here, we're just calling our login function, and we saw in our auth provider, our login function just sets the user here. So all it does is updates the state, but because this is using a provider, this updates everywhere that we are listening to this context. And we're also saving it to async storage, which is important. So if I come to my routes back over here, and I come down to this, what's happening since we're listening to the user here is we just no longer show the stack navigator. So what's very important about this is we're actually not telling the app to navigate from the stack to the tabs. All we're doing is we're setting the user and it's automatically happening. And so the benefit of that is if a user is not logged in, there's no way that they see this screen because they're just going to be shown the screen here with the stack navigator. Now ideally, to just split this up to make it a little bit cleaner, I like to create an auth stack component. And I'm just going to put this stack in it. So you're going to see this file is going to clean up quite a bit, and I think it'll make a lot more sense as well. So I'm going to paste that in here, and I'm just going to grab the register and the login and the stack. Okay, and paste them in here. All right, so I paste the stack navigator stuff, and I pasted the register and the login component as well. And then I'm just going to click on one of these and hit control period. And I wanted to just import all of these for me. So it's not working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command P and then do a caret and just restart my TypeScript server. And usually when I do that, it's going to reload, and then I've hit control period. This usually works, so cool. And I'm just going to say add all missing imports. So this is a nice plus about TypeScript. It may also work in JavaScript, but imports all its stuff for us, fix all the imports. You can also copy them over for routes as well. And then I'm just control spacing to import text. And then what's going to happen over here, you can delete some of this old stuff that we no longer need, is we can say auth stack. All right, so this is a very clean component now where if we have a user, they can view the app. If they are not a user, they're null, then we show them the auth stack. And again, when our app first loads, this route component, what it's going to do is it's going to show a loading spinner. And while that is loading, it's going to check async storage to see if a user exists. And if it does, it's going to automatically log them in. Now again, this may not actually be an async storage call in your code. This may be an API call to your servers to check if there's a user exists. It depends on your application. So definitely make this more complex if you need it. But that should give you the basic structure. So now I want to just expand on our app tabs further from there. And so basically you can see what's going to happen is we're going to add more to our tabs, and we can actually start nesting a stack navigator inside of our tabs. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we're going to add some stuff to our tabs here. All right, so I pulled up the documentation for the tab navigator, and I just want to grab a chunk of code from here that's going to help us add icons to our tabs. So if we come here, I'm going to just scroll down, and this is under guides, tab navigation, to the customizing appearance. So we're going to be using vector icons. Now we're using Expo, or I'm using Expo, so I can just import it like this, and Expo is going to have it. Otherwise, you're going to need to install this React Native Vector Icons package. So what we're going to do is copy this code. So specifically this screen options prop here, and this tab bar options. So I'm going to copy this chunk, and we're going to put this on our tab navigator. So I'm going to come back over here, paste it in. And then also I'm going to copy this import up here and come up to the top, paste that in. Now if you're using TypeScript, it's going to have some errors on the setting here. And the reason for that is our route name is either home or search. So settings should never exist. So I'm just going to call this search here. And so it's going to use this icon for home and this icon for search. Now I can toggle back and forth. Now you'll notice what's happening with the code here is, so what's happening with the tab bar icon is we have an icon name, which is just a variable, and what we're doing is we're checking what the route is and assigning what we want the string to be given the particular route that we're on, and then it's rendering that icon down here. And these are coming from Ionic icons, and you can see based on whether the screen is focused or not, it is actually doing a different icon. Now usually I don't do this advanced of a switching of icons, but this is a very popular thing I've seen lately. So if you want to use this, you can keep this in. Just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to just remove it to just simplify the code a little bit. So we're just going to have focused removed. So I'll give that a save. And so what you'll notice with the tabs down here is they're not changing the style of them, just changing the color when we click between them there. So that's the main difference. And now if you want to choose different icons, you can. So if we go to expo.github.io/vector-icons, you can search the entire icon repo. So I can pick a different home icon if I want. So maybe I want to do a little wonky ant design home here. I can. So what would happen here is I just say ant design, and I'm going to say ant design, and then here I'm going to put in the name for home, which in this case is just home. Now I may want to use different design packs per, say, tab. Actually usually don't, but let's say I'm a little crazy and I do. So I can just put it up here. So let's say we want to keep the default Ionic icon for our search, we could. So bring that back. ionic icons. All right, give that a save. And now I have a nice little home icon here. And then let's go find ourselves a nice search one. So search. Okay, looks like AntDesign has one, so let's keep ourselves in AntDesign. Well, I guess I was going to show you what it looks like if you want to make them different. Let's say we want to use evil icons for this. Could just do this. And I could say evil. And I need to come up here first. Search. Alright, so now I have search and home, and I think you get the gist. You can customize the icons to whatever you want them to be for each tab there. Now the other thing that I wanted to mention, again, we can do the colors, but with my home here, I have logout just kind of sitting here. Now usually each one of these components here is actually a navigation stack on its own. Like from home, I want to be able to go to different pages, and I want to have its own little header at the top here. So what's going to happen is I'm going to actually create a stack for home. So I'm going to say home stack.tsx here. And so here, I'm going to say const stack is equal to create stack navigation. Nice, it finally auto-completed for me. And here I'm going to say stack.navigator and then stack.screen. And let's say the first screen for this stack is just going to be the feed. And so again, I can create another param list for this. So you can see it does get a tiny bit tedious for each one of these stacks to set this all up, but it is pretty nice once you do have it set up. So I have home param list now. I'm going to go to app param list and just copy this. And we just have a single screen right now called feed in this particular stack. And we're going to create just a feed function real quick. All right. And I'm going to close a couple tabs. I don't think we need the auth provider anymore, or the providers tab, and the auth param list I'm going to close. Okay. So now in my app tabs, instead of passing in a home component, I'm actually going to pass in a home stack. So home stack. So what you'll notice is happening here is there's actually a stack navigator being passed to one of the tabs. And so this is what I meant by nesting navigators. And so now I can see the feed title up here. And one of the things I might want to do is have logout not be in here, but be in the header. Maybe a logout button that I press up there. So what I can do is I can say options, and I can actually make this we don't need to make this a function, but we can. We're going to actually do that in a little bit, but I'm going to keep an object for now. I can say header right, and I can actually return a touchable opacity like that, or I could probably slap a button up here that just says logout. And then on press, what I'd like to do is call our logout. So use context, auth context, logout. Oops. And give that a save. And invalid hook call. Hooks can only be called inside the body of a function component. I'm guessing it doesn't like it because this is not actually going to actually end up being a component. So maybe I just need to move this up to the home stack up here. Yeah, there you go. It likes it better up there. So yeah, these are components, so we can stick hooks up here at least. I actually hadn't tried doing hooks like this before, so I guess we can't pass hooks in there. But again, we can always pass them up here. That works. All right, so we have our touchable. I'm pushing logout here. Now, something I didn't mention when I was typing that all out, all that stuff got auto-imported as I was typing, so auth context got imported and all that stuff. All right, so now I can just press logout like that. It's going to log me out like usual there. Error boundaries should implement get derived state. I'm not going to worry about this. Dismiss. But there you go. That is how we can add headers. We can also add a header left if we want to, but I'm not going to worry about that for now. So back to our app tabs for a second. I can actually just remove our home component here. We don't need that anymore since we're using our home stack here. And so usually on the home stack, we have a feed. Let's go ahead and create our feed component and actually show some posts, if you will. Because the most common thing you're going to want to do is click on a post and go to a new screen and see that post full screen, right? So what I'm going to do here is display a flat list. And we're going to pass in some data here. Now I'm going to, and this auto-completed touchable and flat list from React Native gesture handler, I'm actually just going to put this in React Native. All right, and here I'm going to pass in some data. I'm going to say array from. So I'm just going to create some random data. Array.from, I'm going to say my array is going to be a size 50. And this is just an array to, what's going to do is going to map 50 times and call this function 50 times. So I can just create, I can just pass a random generator here. In this case, I'm going to use faker. So I'm going to import faker up here. And I'm going to say faker dot company or commerce, that works too. And I'm just going to call the product function. And let's drop this to a new line. So what this is going to do at the end of the day is just give us an array that is length 50 with this function called 50 times. So it's going to be just an array of strings with random product names. And the key extractor is just going to be product. And actually, they may not be unique. So we're going to pass in the index. This is usually a sinful thing to do, so usually you don't want to do that. Usually you want unique keys or something, but forgive me for now. Let's render an item. All right, so we got our item here. And I guess I'll just make it a button. And then on press, we're going to deal with in a second. So we'll give that a save. Okay. So you can see here we just got a bunch of random items, I suppose. And we can scroll through it. All right, this is kind of a skinny guy. I think if I just do flex 1, that maybe it's container. Content container style. Let's see if that does it. Oh, you know what? It's probably with 100%, not flex. There we go. I just wanted to get the scroll bar all the way to the right over here. All right, so we got our flat list with all these items. Pretend these are pretty posts. Idea next is to actually click on one of these and be taken to a new screen. Okay, so we're going to set up a new screen for what a single product will look like. I'm going to create a function here called product, and I'm just going to return, for now, center text product, and we're going to fill this in a little bit more in a second. So we're going to create a new screen here called stack.screen name, and then again, I haven't actually set up the auto completion for this yet. So home param list will stick in here. I think I created home param list but forgot to pass it in here. Let's come back over here now and add our product is what I guess I'll call it. So then down here I can say product now, and then component is going to be product. Excellent. So now I can navigate from here to here with the navigation prop, and I'd love some auto completion, so I'm going to set up my type real quick. So my auth param list, I'm going to copy this auth nav props, paste it in here. So we need to create a new one of these props for every param list. At least that's kind of the way I set it up. So we would do home nav props, and maybe we could call this home stack nav props. And then the idea is we just pass in our new param list. And then we need to import stack and route prop. Give that a save, And now we can use this over here. And this is going to be our feed page. And right here, I can say navigation.navigate and go to our product, and we'll give that a save. So now if I click this and go to cheese, I can now see the cheese product. Except this doesn't really look like cheese, right? It just says generic product. I can come back here, it says product on each one, right? So the idea is we want to customize this given the product that we actually click on. So to know what product we clicked on, we need to pass in a parameter. The way we pass in a parameter here is by having a second object that we pass in when we navigate. And here I can pass in whatever I want. So for example, here I'm going to say name and pass in the item. So I know the name of the product. Now I know this is getting mad at me because I said we didn't have any parameters for product. If we come to our param list, I said it's undefined. So this is where I can actually pass in an object and then put the types. So in this case, name, which is a string. So we'll give that a save, and then it's no longer complaining over here. And then what I can do is from my product over here, I can use my same type that I created. So home stack, give that a copy. And then this is just going to be the product page. And then given the route, you can say route dot, and you'll notice how there's a param on here now, get the name of the product. So if I click on towels now and go to the towels page, I can actually see that, yes indeed, we are looking at towels now. Now usually you want to pass like an ID and you'll actually fetch the ID for towels, but this gives you an idea of how you can pass the param down. Now a very common thing you're going to want to do with this is also change the title up here. Usually sometimes you want to match the title, or sometimes you want to keep it generic product. If you want to keep it generic product, that's good. If you want to change it, how it would work is you say options, and then we're actually going to return an object here. So notice how we're passing in a function instead of just an object. What we have access to is the route. So what we can do here is we can say the header title is equal to route.params.name. So I don't know, maybe we want to say product, right, like that, and then actually put the name of the product here. So product towels, and it shows up there, right? So you can actually use the route. And then you can also use navigation if you need access to navigation. Those are the two things you get access to here. And usually on these screens, you're going to have some kind of button to go to another screen. So for example, I may want to edit towels, or see more details about towels, or some random navigation. So we're going to add another screen to show you how that would work. So I'm going to add a edit product screen. So I'm going to just copy this and call this edit product. And maybe we have for the title, edit, and then my component I'm going to call edit product. So I need to add this to our param list and create this component. So let's add to our home param list first. And we're also going to need the name here, so I'm going to say name string there. And oops, I forgot to save it. Save that. Come over here, create our edit product. And I guess we can actually pretty much copy this. And I'm going to say edit product. And then the type here is going to be edit product. And then all I'm going to do here is add a button to go to the edit version. So I'm going to say button, edit this product. And then on press, I'm going to grab the navigation prop here and navigate. And I'm also passing in the parameter, right? So the name. So we're getting that from the route params, and we can just pass that through to the next route as well. So what this will look like now is in our product towels page, I can click on this to now edit towels. And you'll notice now we have a stack going here. So when I press back, it takes me here. If I press back again, it's going to take us back to the original feed. Now I can go to fish and edit fish and so forth. So you notice how we can go to a stack for each. I just clicked on fish twice. Let's go to shirt now. Right. So for each one of those, we can create, if you will, like a stack of that going on. Now, there's one thing that I want to show you on the edit screen, because this is going to be a very common thing to do, and it's a little weird how it works. So you may want to have a done button up here to actually save this once you edit. Like maybe you'll have a nice pretty edit form here, and then you click up here in the header to save it. So how would you actually do that, right? So what's going to happen here is in the edit product, we are going to say header right, and we're going to return a touchable opacity and then some text, and we're going to just return done. I don't know why I've been uppercasing. I'm just going to just do regular case for that. I can see the done up here, and again, we can style this if we want, so maybe some padding right, like 5, so just so it's not like smashed against the edge, maybe like 8. But right, we have a button up here. Maybe we want to give it a color. Dang, I don't know how to design things. Let's make it pink. Alright, no, I'm just kidding. Let's make it red so we can see it. Alright, so maybe I want to press this to finish and be done with stuff. Now the idea is, when I on-press this, I'd like to submit the form. But the idea is, usually the form and the state for the form is inside the component, aka in edit product here, right? And so how do I get the submit button here to submit the information that is inside edit product? Right here, right? How do I get them to communicate, if you will? There's several ways to do this, but one way you can do directly just within React Navigation is with the following. So we can here add a submit ref. So I'm going to say use ref, and then I can say submit.current, and then this function here is the submit function, right? Now it doesn't like it. I can pass a default function like that in to make it happy, or I can set the type there. So with this submit function, usually I have to access some form state. So maybe I'm using formic, maybe I have use state here like this, and I have, you know, some form state, aka like the name of the product, and maybe, I don't know, description of the product, some information that I want to change. So here is where I'm going to make an API call with the new form state, and I don't know, let's create a dummy function here. And I don't know, let's return X. And then after this, usually what you want to do is, with navigation, I want to navigate back. So maybe I'll say go back like that. And so this is the submit button, right? I want this function to be called whenever I press done up here. So what I'm going to do is I say use effect, and we only need to do this a single time, and that's very important, and that's because we're using a ref, so it's never going to change. At least the reference isn't going to change, the object may, right? This is going to change every render. But what we can do here is we can say navigation.set params, and we can set submit as a parameter here. Now we need to actually add submit, and you'll notice we're going to get a little bit of a warning here. You can click on this, and that's because we're adding a non-serializable value. All that means is submit is a function, and you cannot serialize a function into a string. So serialize, it just means a function cannot be turned into a string there. So I'm just going to dismiss this. We don't really have to worry about that. We don't have a problem with that. We're not persisting state currently. So I have my use effect here. I am passing the submit as a parameter. Now I'm going to just add this to the type, so TypeScript is happy with me. So I'm going to come up here, and in my edit product here, I'm going to say submit, and I'm going to make this possibly undefined because they don't actually pass this in when I'm navigating from product to edit product. And if I hover over what the value of this is, I can just copy it. Oops. Dang, you have to be kind of careful when you do this. You have to like hover, go straight up, straight across. Make sure your cursor never goes outside the box. There we go. Paste that in there. And give that a save. And now you can see it's happy with me, right? And then I can access this here by saying route.params.submit.current. And we are going to be using this fun little syntax. This just makes sure if this is undefined, nothing happens. Alternatively, we could do an if statement. All right, so we're checking to make sure submit exists. If it does, we're calling the current submit function. And so if this is wired up correctly, whenever I press done, what's going to happen is it's going to do our API call, fake update, and then it's going to navigate. And again, this could be, dot then, if we want this to be a promise, and then we navigate back, right? In this case, it's not a promise, so I'm not going to do that, but just to give you an idea if this was async. All right, so I'm going to press this, and now it takes me back here. So edit the product, and when I'm done, I can press this. So that's kind of a very common flow. You may want to edit something or do some kind of behavior, and then maybe the header up here is the way you submit it. So that is how you can get a function call that you need local information and data from. Like I need the form state in here, but I want to be able to call it from up there. You pass that ref, and then you can call it here. Okay, so from here you can add a bunch of other screens that you may need for your application, but I think you get the gist of how it works. You're going to be adding more screens, and then you can navigate and pass props to those different screens if you need to, like we just showed. What I want to do next is show you kind of a little bit of an advanced tactic when you have kind of the same screens you need to show in different tabs. So for example, here in the home, I'm showing some different products, but in the search tab, I also want to search products and then be able to look at them after I click on that, right? So I want to be able to kind of share some of the information between the two different tabs, if you will. So I'm going to show you how I like to set that up. So we're going to come on over to, I believe it is our home tabs, or sorry, app tabs. And what we're going to do is we are going to turn the search component into its own stack, right? Because we just created the home stack. We're now going to create the search stack. So I'm going to create a new file here called searchstack.tsx. And then we're going to follow kind of the same pattern that we've been doing. So I'm going to say stack, create stack navigator. And then inside of here, stack.navigator, stack.screen, and I can create a param list for this. So I'm going to call it search param list.tsx, and I'm going to copy my home param list here. And I'm going to say search, and I'm going to wait on adding the other type until see if we actually need it / use it. And so, okay, so here's the thing. So we're going to keep the product and edit product here for now, because for searching, I want these two. I'm just going to rename this to search. But we're going to see how we can kind of get rid of this duplicate stuff in a second. So in our search stack, I'm going to pass in the search param list now. Let me just close this so we have a little bit more space. And then I'm going to pass in search and then our component here. And so I can go back to our app stack, or sorry, app tabs, and I can just grab our search component. And import both text and React Native, or text from React Native and center. Pass this in. And then from my app tabs here, I'm now going to pass in the search stack. So give that a save. Get rid of these imports I'm not using. And now I can toggle between the two stacks. And if you're unfamiliar with how the tab navigator works, I kind of want to show you what happens when we have two tabs and we have stacks for each. So if I go into like gloves, for example, and I'm on the home screen, if I click over to search and I click back now, it's going to keep gloves up here for me. And again, if I edit, right, it's going to keep the state of the stack. The other thing to note is if I go in and I click here, it's going to take me back to the home if I was already on the home. So it actually will reset to the top of the stack, if you will. Okay, so I have my search, I have my home. I now want some of the same stuff kind of on the search. So here I'm going to show a search bar, and then after they search, I want some stuff to show up and that they can click on. So maybe I have a button at the top, search products. All right, I did the button wrong. We're actually supposed to do the button like this in React Native. I sometimes forget. All right. And now I actually kind of want to just show the same products, and I don't want to worry about actually creating a legit search input. Just to give you an idea of how it works, I'm going to copy the feed. So I think I created the feed here. I'm going to copy the flat list, paste it here. But maybe I don't show the flat list right away, so it kind of looks like it's searching, you know? So I'll say false. And I'll say set show to true whenever we click on search products. And I only show the flat list if this is true, otherwise null. Save that. I need to import the flat list. Now I need to also import faker. Give that a save. And I'm going to comment out the navigation when we click on the product. We're going to deal with that in just a second. So I have on the search screen on my search tab, and if I click on search, it's now going to show the items here. And then ideally when I click on an item, it's going to do the same thing I would on the search, right? Or sorry, on the home page. It would take me to a screen like this. Now, ideally, now in a real app, you'll usually have the UI look totally different, but the end result is you'll type some stuff in and you'll see kind of some posts or some products, and you'll click on it and it may show the same screen. If it doesn't show the same screen, you're just going to create some new screens. But if you want to show the same screen as you would, say, in another page, what I like to do is kind of reuse those screens. So instead of hard coding my screens that I have here, the product and the edit product in the home stack, I like to create a function here. So I call it like add product routes. And then what I'll put in this function is all the routes that I need related to a product. So export const add product routes. And I'm specifically making this a function on purpose because I need to have all the children be screens for React navigation to be happy. So this is kind of a React navigation requirement. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to just copy these two screens. And then if you want to do this in your own product, basically what you want to think about is if you have a set of screens that should always be shown together, this is how you can put them in the same, if you will, add whatever it is routes function. And so you'll notice we're going to need to have access to a stack, but depending on what stack we're in, it's going to be different. So we're actually going to take that as a parameter. And for now, I'm just going to make it the type any. We're going to fix that in a second. All right, so I'm going to import all the missing imports. I'm going to get this from React Native. Import this, control space on text. All right, so my edit product and my product, I'm going to copy over. And then I'm going to leave the feed in here. All right, paste this in here. And now I need to kind of like copy over some of these imports, or I can command period on a component and push all to import them all. That looks like it worked okay. And then the idea is with the home stack over here, I just call add product routes and I pass in the stack. And I need to give this a save over here. And we just need to import React, I believe. Undefined is not an object in route params. So we kind of changed some stuff, so I just want to make sure we have everything all in the right place now. So I'm just going to do a full reload here. All right, so we have something messed up. It says route.params.name is undefined, probably when we're accessing one of our products here. I think what I need to do is maybe in the home stack, set the initial route. I think what might be happening here is because I added this at the top, it's going directly to the product route, or at least the edit product route, and we expect a parameter and no parameter was passed in. So I'm just going to say feed here, see if that fixes it. And I'm just going to refresh it again, because I wouldn't expect it to crash like that until we actually went to the edit page if it had the wrong parameter. It should show the feed first. Alright, cool. So we have the feed, and functionality wise this should be the exact same. So if I click on table, should be able to go to products, should be able to come over here just fine. This is expected, done, over here. So the functionality is exactly the same. The only difference now is I can add the products to any stack I want. So I can now copy this, and if I come over to my search stack, can pass this in here, and I'm going to set search as the initial route, and this should just work as well. The other thing to note here is we should do this, and then we can get navigation from here. Now the thing that's a little bit more complex is getting all the TypeScript types to line up, so we're going to do that in a second, but just to show you how this works now, on my search page, again, a user would put in a query, they search the products, see the ones that come up, they would then click on the product and they're taken to the product screen. And I can edit the product, and now you can see I can do the same thing in the product page. Alright, click that, and again, I can toggle between these and have two open if I want, right? So I'm currently editing soap on this tab, and I'm currently editing chicken on this tab. Cool. So that just gives you an idea of how we can split up the two different pages with the two different functionalities. Our feed may display products in a different manner. Our search may display things in a different manner, but they both, at the end of the day, you need to tap on something and be taken to a product screen. That's how you can share it between the two. Alright, so now we're going to go back and make sure everything is type safe with TypeScript. So you can skip this part if you're using JavaScript, but I did just want to mention real quick the function that we created here, add product routes. You may not need to generalize it out to its own function in your app if you don't have this situation where you want to reuse screens. Some apps have it, some don't. It's kind of a more advanced use case, but it does happen a good amount of times in apps, so I wanted to include it in this video. Alright, let's hop into the TypeScript now. So I'm going to click in the add product routes component here, and I just said the stack is going to be of type any. And this is not right. We want to be more specific, at least, about what the type can be. So if I go back to what we passed in, and I'm going to actually just drop this to its own line here. If I come back to where we're calling add products, we can kind of hover over what the value of stack is and use that as the type. So if I hover over stack right here, I can see this is a typed navigator with the following types here. So I can copy this, and I can come back over here, and I can paste it. So I can see this is the TypeScript type for the stack that we were passing in from the home type. You'll notice here that we have this bit here that is a little bit weird looking. And if we import this in, I just hit command period to do that, and I hover over, I can see the different params types. And we can see the last one here, and if I kind of need to look through it here, it says the navigator. We don't necessarily need to use the navigator on this screen. We're only really using the stack screen. And what I would really like is the name here to be checked. So if I get rid of, for example, the letter T, it should tell me, hey, this is the wrong name here. That's really all that I want to set up. So I'm going to just say any here to just simplify what this looks. And I'm also going to say any to these things. Just quite frankly, because I don't need them, right? So I imported that. I'm going to import the home param list, and I'm just going to go ahead and import this. And I thought I imported this, but I'll import it again. There we go. So now this is going to have the types that's going to check. So if I get rid of that T, it's going to make sure that I am writing the right name here. All right, and we're going to get auto completion too. I can see that that is the right name. Now the other thing is home param list is not the only stack that uses this. Right? So now it's happy that we are passing in here, but from the search stack, we're also calling this, and now this is unhappy. So what I can do is I can hover over this, and I can see what the value of the typed navigator is. You notice the big difference is the search param list here is a little bit different. So instead of home, it's going to be search. So I'm just going to do a bar here, and this will allow me to say home or search param list. So it may be in one of these two stacks. So that just auto imported up here for me. All right, so when I did that though, it's good here. Like if I get rid of the name, it's gonna check that for me. But if I come back over here where I'm calling the stack, well, actually it works just fine. I was gonna say earlier when I tried this, well, not earlier, but when I tried this in my own application, it actually didn't like the types. So what I had to end up doing is doing as any. But it likes it here, so cool. It actually is working now. All right, so then we have lined up the types correctly, at least passing in the stack in there. The other thing we can do is the two props here, or params or screens, we can generalize into its own param list. So I could say product param list, and then I'm going to take it from the home and paste it over here. Export type product param list. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to concatenate the two objects. So here I'm going to say home param list, and I'm going to say product param list. So the result should be the exact same, but now I have this in a general form. So if I want to change this, it's going to change in all the places. So I can do this with our other param list, which is going to be the search param list. All right, so now I can get rid of this. And I can say the product param list here, and we can import that in. Now it looks like we are getting an error. Oh, it just can't find the name. That's weird. Okay. So it looks like I saved it. It looks like it's good. Just want to go verify that we didn't break where we're calling this. So it should be in the home stack. Yep, it's still happy. Still good. I think the last thing to do with this is on the product page. You can see here I said the home stack. This can actually be the home stack, or it can be the search stack. So if we want to be like extremely type safe, we can do that, or if you want to, you can keep it simple like this. So just to show you what that would look like, I could say search param list, and if I go over to the home param list and I copy this, we can create our own nav prop for the search page. And again, I'm just going to copy this in. And then import these, and then where it says home here, I'm just going to replace that with search. And give that a save. And then if I go back to our product, and I got a lot of tabs open now. You can see it kind of does get a little bit convoluted when we have all these param lists now. I think a good file structure would help with that, though. I kind of just kept it flat to keep it simple, but I think we're getting to the point where some structure would be nice. But anyway, here I can say home stack or search stack, right? Because these are the two pages it could possibly be on. And again, here I'm going to say product. But as you can see, this is what I tried myself, and scroll down here. It says, but none of those signatures are compatible with each other. So basically, it doesn't really like it when you try doing both of these and you try calling navigate here. Edit product is in both of the pages for search and for home, so this should work. But as you can see, it doesn't. It gets a little messed up, if you will. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll create a recipe stack. So my recipe, sorry, a recipe is what I use for saffron. So I have recipe in my brain. This should be product. So if I go to the product param list, I can create a prop here that's specific for the product. I'm not going to do this here because it's, as you can see, it's getting a little complex for really not a lot of gain here. Usually I just keep this to one of the stacks that it's using here. So we'll keep it like that. But basically the end result here is we should know when we navigate to a page whether that page is possible to navigate from. In this case, the product only is going to say edit, but theoretically here I'd be able to navigate also to any of the search stack or any of the home stack. And so it gets a little bit more complex to actually get the types working for that. And I'm actually not 100% sure what the best approach for that is. My guess would be to create kind of a generic nav prop here for the products and probably do that. I haven't played with that yet, but that's what I would recommend if you are looking to extend this. But anyway, I kind of just rambled a long time there about random TypeScript stuff. That is kind of what happens when you're in the TypeScript world. You have to deal with types like this. It is bittersweet. It's nice when you have it set up, but it does take some time to configure everything and get it working, as you can see. But that is all I wanted to do for this tutorial. I was thinking about also including a drawer navigation in this, but this video got way longer than I expected, and I think you should be able to get it from what I've shown you in this video. So I'm going to leave it as an example or homework for you to try on your own. So give that a try. And I hope you liked this video. Hopefully it was helpful. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up on YouTube, smash that like button, and don't forget to subscribe.